Craving being seen and hating the idea. What does that mean? Well, you know, I'm really the photographer that people hire when they absolutely, positively do not want to be photographed. And that might not make any sense, but it's certainly true. And I think that's the reason why when people hire me, it's usually after they've seen me speak at a retreat or a conference. Now, in the last 8 years, and I'm not counting 2020. I mean, 2020 is part of the 8 years, but I really didn't do any retreats at all in 2020. But I've spoken at retreats all around the world over the course of the last 8 years. And I've spoken to many thousands of women. And I've worked with more than 700 of those women. And in fact, I've conducted more than 1,000 photo and video sessions in that time. If you do the math, you'll see that many of my clients are actually repeat customers. And there's a reason why they keep coming back for this. But what's really fascinating to me, it became fascinating to me really early on with this work, is that when I'm done with the speech that I do from the stage, and I step off the stage and go down into the crowd of people who are going on break and going to the back of the room to sign up to work with me, I'm always approached by a lot of people, a lot of women, and really individually, they're not listening to each other talk, but individually, they're all telling me the reasons why they do not want to be photographed. And I was not expecting that when I first started doing this work, but that accounts for most of the conversations that I have throughout the time that I'm at a retreat or a conference, is the list of things, list of reasons, list of things that have happened in the past, list of things they presently don't like about themselves. There's this really sometimes long list of reasons why they don't want to be photographed. Now, I feel incredibly honored because those people always end up hiring me to photograph them at these events. You know, they didn't know I was going to be there. They didn't know I was going to be on stage. They didn't know what I was going to be talking about. And they didn't know I was going to be offering the opportunity to work with me. But when they've heard me speak about these things and how I see things and what I've learned over the course of time, they make that choice, the choice to confront something that they really haven't wanted to do. And this is why when my clients ask their friends, hey, if you need photographs, work this guy, their friends are like, no thank you. Like, I don't want to be seen. A lot of them, right? Not everybody, but most people. Certainly the vast majority of people that I meet at these retreats and conferences. And early on, I started asking myself this question, why? Why is it that people, and specifically because these are the people I'm speaking to, women have this push-pull dynamic with being seen? Because they really, the ones I speak to, hate the idea. They've had bad experiences, they're getting past something, right? But still, it's this craving because they know they bring so much to the table. And somewhere inside, whether they're aware of it in that moment or not, they know that being seen is part of what has to happen in order to bring those gifts fully to the table. Now, what happened over the course of time, as I heard more and more of these stories, is I started to sort of draw a line. There was a common thread between everything that I was hearing. No matter where I was in the world, by the way. So it didn't matter if I was in Europe, Australia, somewhere in the United States. The story of women, I have found, at least as it pertains to the work that I do, is the same at this one base level, the women that I speak to. Now, this is a good place to stop and put a little disclaimer up, a little asterisk on everything that I'm telling you. Everything that I know about this work has been learned from my clients. So these aren't concepts that I came up with in a lab somewhere and went out to sort of apply. This is real world stuff that when someone walks into my studio that may be at, set up in a conference room at a hotel, and they are, getting ready to have the photographs taken by me, stuff comes up. Sometimes huge stuff comes up. And I'll be getting into a couple of stories that people have told me that I can share. Some of the things I've heard, situations I've been in, and how we've gotten from A to B to C to D, and on and on and on. Well, the common thread that I mentioned a moment ago that I hear is this base fear that when this moment through photography is frozen in time, essentially, for all the world to see, social media, websites, things like that, that when that moment is displayed, that they will somehow be judged as not having been enough. That is a word, a phrase that I hear quite a bit when my clients come to work with me the first time. It's the fear of not being enough. Now, why would any woman in the world feel like she might not be enough? I'm not sure if sarcasm works on Facebook Live or not, but I'm being sarcastic with that comment because, of course, there are a million reasons that many women feel like they are not enough. This is a message that comes from every direction, really, all day long, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, from social media, from the advertising industry, of course, from the beauty industry, sometimes from friends and family, right? Sometimes from the one person, that intimate partner that you feel safe with. And it's not always on purpose. Like with the advertising industry, right, they've got something to sell you. Sometimes with family, sometimes with intimate partners. In their own way, they may be trying to protect us somehow, right? Or they may just be manipulating, as the case may be. But there's this message: not tall enough, not young enough, not skinny enough, not blonde enough, not young enough. Did I say that already? Just somehow not quite enough. And that's a real fear. And when that moment is going to be frozen in time and then, for example, shared on social media, that is a real fear. Now, I worked with a client at a retreat in the DC area about 5 or 6 years ago. And as part of this retreat, I actually presented at this retreat throughout the day, every day of a long weekend retreat. And as part of these people being, buying into this retreat that was run by someone else, they each received a photo session with me. So whether or not they wanted it, it was part of the package. They could choose to do it or not do it, but it was part of the package. So I met with one particular woman. She met me at the designated meeting space. And right away she said, I'm sorry. I should have called you and let you know that you didn't need to be here because I'm not going to do this. I've decided I'm not going to do this. I'm sorry I wasted your time. I'll take you somewhere. I'll buy you a coffee or lunch or something, but this is not happening. I'm not doing this photo session. And I just paused and I said, so do you want to tell me a little bit about what's going on for you that you don't want to do the photo session? And without pausing, she listed off 3 things that she hated about herself. I'm this, and I'm this. And there were things that we would never say to anyone else that we know, right? Or even a stranger. We would never say these things, but we give ourselves special permission to be extra judgmental with ourselves sometimes. 3 things we would definitely never say to anyone else, to the point where I don't even like to repeat those 3 things because it just feels painful. It just feels painful. So she told me the 3 things, and then she added, and when you did your introductory speech to us the other morning, you said that this work works for every woman no matter what. And I don't want to be the one woman that this doesn't work for. Now, I hadn't really considered that particular fear up to that point. I've heard other things. I've heard where people say, oh, I love the people in your slideshow that I saw during your speech, but they're special. They're beautiful. I'm not. And, they're good enough to be in your slideshow. And I what I always tell them is the people in the slideshow are people that came to me and said, I love the people in the slideshow. I could never be the person in the slideshow. So that's not true. Everyone is capable of that. But I hadn't thought about this specific fear of, me standing on stage and saying this works for absolutely everyone, and having someone be like, well, what does that mean if it doesn't work for me? Right? That's a real pressure for her in that moment. And I didn't pause, I didn't hesitate, and I said, you give me 5 minutes, I will show you the most beautiful photograph you have ever seen of yourself. And she kind of sat back for a moment, and she said, 5 minutes? How are you going to do that? And I said, all you have to do is give me the 5 minutes. Just give me the 5 minutes. And so she said, okay, well, let's go outside. So we went outside. 5 minutes later, I showed her a photograph on the back of my camera. She started crying with joy. And at the end of at the end of the hour that we had together, right? Because I'm showing her photographs on the back of the camera all along as we were going through the photo session. At the end of the hour, she said, well, with this package that I get with the retreat, I get 5 pictures of my choice, but how do I get more if I want more? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. So I said, let's just pause for a moment and remember the story at the beginning of the photo session. And the things that you said about yourself that you see now are not true. You see that they are not true. Now, like all of my clients, essentially, she became a friend. And we're Facebook friends. I don't see all of my clients that often, especially this past year, but we are all friends because we get to know each other during these sessions. But I saw a few months after her photo session that she was engaged. And then a few months after that, I saw that she was married. And in the ensuing years since then, I see all these photos of all the fun that she's having with her amazing husband. So much fun. Well, she sent me a little note a couple weeks ago. This is why this story is fresh in my head. And she's like, I just want to tell you what this photo session did for me, how it changed my life. She said, I had been alone for 25 years. I'd been alone for 25 years. I have the love of my life now. Now, it's not that these photographs magically, made this connection between her and this other person, right? And it's not that these photographs changed something about who she is. It's that seeing herself in that moment changed the way she saw herself. Now, I know that sounds kind of complicated, but one way I like to put this is taking control of the mirror. Because when we wake up in the morning and we shuffle over to the mirror and look into that reflection, a lot of times, we may have our affirmations, but I think a lot of times we come up with this list of those things that we don't particularly like about the person that we are looking at in this reflection. Now, my contention is that what we're responding to when we look into that reflection is that judgmental person looking back at us. Have you ever been standing in front of someone who's judging you in that moment? And they're judging you. And they may even be telling you that they're judging you. They're just making some judgment about you. Are you looking at that person and seeing the best version of them? Are you looking at that person and thinking, what an attractive person this is? Probably not. You're probably thinking, there are a lot of things I don't like about this person right now who's making these judgments. That's what you're looking at in the mirror when you're making those judgments. If we treated ourselves, as well as we treat strangers and friends, right? I think all of us are at some level striving to be conscious creatures who see others with compassion and non-judgment. But what happens when we look in that mirror? Where does that compassion go? Where does that non-judgment go? We say the worst things to ourselves. So what I'm doing at this work is taking that mirror away from the person looking into it and showing them what they look like when I see them. When I see them. Now, we've had conversations, usually, sometimes it's very brief, before the session, so I know what it is that exists within them that maybe they haven't seen in a while, that they want to see again. So I can watch for it. And I'm not just standing there waiting for them to show me. And I'm not creating it on them or in them. What I'm doing in this work is removing the armor that stands between them and my camera, them and me. And so if they have something that they want to express, it's not going to show up until that armor falls away. And so I have some processes that I use with people that I'm going to get back to in a little bit, but I want to continue along this line. You know, I mentioned 3 things in the promotion for this video. 3 things that might be getting in the way as we crave being seen and showing up and being appreciated. Like, to be seen is really to be appreciated. It's to have connection. And I don't mean everyone dropping everything and going, oh my gosh, I love how beautiful you are. But people noticing. When you are present and your armor falls away and you let those things come up in you, when you embody those things, your power, right? Your power, your adventurous nature, your sensuality, your intelligence, your creativity, your spirituality, this infinite number of things that this could be, people see it. You don't really think they're going to see it. You know, a lot of people are afraid no one's going to see my power unless I put on my Wonder Woman costume and, you know, get my golden lasso and have someone take photographs of me. That's not seeing someone's power. That's seeing more artifice of power. And I'm not talking smack about Wonder Woman photos, so I apologize if it came across that way. Costume stuff is really fun. But what my clients are looking for is not to have more facade. What my clients are looking for is authentic connection that's between who they want, whether that's ideal clients or ideal partners, or even that ideal vision of themselves, and what they want, right? More clients, more money, more love, right? So, trauma. I'm going to talk about trauma first because, you know, I don't think this is only because of the retreats and conferences that I tend to speak at. This feels general public to me. Man, there is a lot of trauma out there. Now, when I say trauma, I mean everything from, you know, breast cancer, rape, to unkind words, you know, things that happen in divorce, things that, I'm not joking when I say this, so don't think I'm kidding. Things that other kids said on the playground 60 years ago. It's real. Now, I've heard every kind of story. And every time I hear one of these stories and I'm able to go through these processes with my clients, I contend that this takes me apart as a person, cell by cell, and rearranges me into what I hope is a better man. And I hope that this becomes more clear as I tell you some of these stories. So when I talk about working with trauma, you know, I'm actually going to tell you a story that I wasn't planning on telling you, but this was probably 8 years ago. A man approached me who runs a program for veterans reintegration program in Denver, Colorado. So he helps veterans coming back from war, you know, find homes and find work. And mental health help, right? PTSD is rampant and has always been rampant in the military, always. Used to call it shell shock, right? Anyway, so he approached me and he said, so what do you do these days? Because I heard something like you work with women or something, I don't understand it. So I explained the work as I understood it then, which was infancy compared to the way I understand it now after working with so many more people. And he said, you know, I'm having more and more female veterans come through my system, and I'm trying to find things that are specific to what their unique needs are in this work. He said they're homeless, drug and alcohol addicted, You know, obviously not working, falling into other traps that are specific traps that women fall into when they get in these desperate places, right? And there's drugs and alcohol involved. And he said, you know, I found this program in Boulder. In Boulder, Colorado. It's a wild horse therapy program in which they have all these wild horses at this ranch, and therapists and social workers and veterans advocates, and then they have the horse handlers, and then the female veterans come and participate in this program. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like something I would absolutely love to photograph. And so he said, all right, here's where it's going to be and everything. Well, between the time he invited me and the time I was going, I got a disinvitation from the people who run the program. And the disinvitation was, it was very, very kind and pleasant, and just said, look, this is an extremely fragile place because of the stories being shared and the sacredness of this space. And I thought, that's perfectly fine, but, and I responded and I said, that is absolutely fine, I totally get it. Just let me send you a video of one of my speeches that I had just started doing at that time. So I sent the video, and I didn't try to push them in any direction. I just sent it and I said, whatever you think after you watch this, it's fine by me. I just want to make sure you have this sacred space intact. I feel like I can be there and keep it intact, but it's up to you. So anyway, watch the video, say, okay, you can come. Just keep your distance while you're there. So I get there, a couple days later for this event, and I walk into this beautiful horse pasture, and there's this huge cottonwood tree in the middle of this pasture. Oh my gosh, the Flatiron Mountains of Boulder right behind. Oh, it was just so beautiful. And then down below this huge cottonwood tree was a circle of chairs, and they were filled with the female veterans, the horse handlers, the therapists, social workers, veterans, advocates, etc. And I was taking photographs from 100 yards away or so, and just the most beautiful day. I think it was in May or June. It's just glorious. And as I was taking photographs, I was getting closer and closer to the circle, remaining not a part of the circle. And if you've seen me photograph a wedding, you know that I am Mr. Invisible photographer when I need to be. So, but as I was getting closer, I started to hear some of the stories being told. And in particular, I was like 20 feet away from the circle or something, and I heard a woman recounting a story of her sexual assault at the hands of her fellow service members. And I just want to put a pin in this for a moment and say that all of the female veterans that had been brought to this, or that were at this event, had been picked up by a van at different homeless shelters around Denver and brought to the event. And I'm just making this little side note that it is a travesty how we treat all of our veterans, right? That sign up to serve our country, and then we don't have always the help that they need. Now, put on top of that what the female veterans had experienced, which is what is often, and I've heard this from more than one client who served, sexual assault at the hands of fellow service members, commanding officers, etc., etc. I just wanted to stop and do that because it's a thing. So, when I heard her telling her very graphic story about what she had experienced, my instant thought was, I got too close. I'm too close to the circle. So I turned around and I started to walk away from the circle. But I knew somewhere that she knew that I turned my back on her. After all she had been through, for a man to be that close to be able to hear her and then to choose to walk away. And so I had the presence of mind somehow in that moment to stop, and I actually stopped and I put my camera down on a cooler and I walked over and I sat down across from her just outside the circle, and I wanted her to know I was staying. I was staying. Now, when she was done, I stood back up and I got my camera and I continued to work, and I stood pretty much wherever I needed to at that point. I felt like I was a part of this. And so when the lunch break came and I was off at this picnic table by myself eating a tuna fish sandwich or something while everyone else was at, kind of on the other side, I'm trying to stay distant, she stood up and she walked across the grass to me at my little picnic table, and I thought, here, I'm going to get in trouble. I was too close and I'm about to be ejected from this beautiful event. But no, she came over and she said, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for not walking away. She said, thank you for listening, because we need more people to know about what's happening in the military, and specifically we need more men to know and to spread that word. And so that's part of the reason I'm telling you this story. I don't want to talk for 2 hours, but I feel like I definitely could. But if I could give you another side note, all my side notes are about masculinity, healthy masculinity, I think, and about my journey towards being a better man. And this was definitely a moment, because I realized that my initial reaction to hearing her story was probably pretty similar to my reaction to seeing anyone that I loved in pain. And I'm a sensitive guy and I love everybody. So seeing her in pain, I had this visceral reaction too, right? Because when we're as men, and I'm speaking in completely general terms, with women that we love, care about, and they're going through something or crying or, upset, we want to fix it. We really do. We want to fix it. In that moment, that initial moment of hearing her story, there was nothing I would have loved more than to be able to wipe that from her existence. But that's part of her, right? No one's going to do that, man or woman. So what I found is that men tend to, the second thing they want to do is retreat, which is exactly what I started to do, because I turned my back and I started walking away. Not only because they conveniently told me not to get too close, but also because of all the other things I felt in that moment, which included, an impotency, the inability to help her, shame at being a man in that moment, just for a moment, shame. And so I turned and I started to walk away. And what I found, sorry for my segue here, but what I found incredibly helpful in all the relationships I've had since that moment is staying. And this especially helps me in my work, is staying no matter what. No matter what. So this has come in handy quite a few times. So I want to get back to trauma so that I don't make this a 2-hour talk. And I've heard every kind of story you could possibly imagine. I've been, in a hotel conference room where I have a little studio set up, working with a woman who, while I'm setting up the lights, says, this is the first time I've been alone in the room with a man since I was raped 5 years ago. These are the kinds of things that I do here. And she says, I want to reconnect to my sensuality. Do you think that that's possible? What happens if in that moment I say, I can't do this? No matter what, staying and doing the work. And yes, we found it, right? I was on a boudoir photo session, sensual portrait session, with someone who, at the hotel room, we had the hotel room set up, we had all the stuff set up, and told me that I'm sorry, I should probably put a trigger alert on these things, but if you're talking to me, sensitive and quiet as I am, there's probably going to be some triggering stuff, so here's another one, trigger alert. And I have, by the way, permission to share these tidbits without identifying people, so have been told that the only sexual partner that this person had ever had, who was in her 30s, was someone who was a member of her family. That is a story that I hear more often than I can count. And it's terrifying that I hear it so often from people who volunteer the information to me. But here's the thing about trauma that I wanted to get to 20 minutes ago when I started talking about it. I don't measure it. We don't measure it. So someone actually hired me that said, gee, I feel kind of guilty having hired you having hired you because I haven't experienced some terrible trauma, and I feel like that's your jam, right? Is working with women who've experienced trauma. And I said, well, it's not a prerequisite to work with me. It's just something that I find often. And she said, yeah, I've never had any kind of big trauma in my life. So I said, okay. So I start working with her, and she's like, make sure you don't make my ears look too big. Like, I hate my ears. Don't make them look too big. I'm like, as all the time, I never know what my clients are talking about when they're like, don't make my ears too big. My eyes are different sizes. See these? My eyes are significantly different sized. Who cares? Nobody cares. We care. And here's why she cared. So she mentioned her ears a few times, and then she said, ever since I was a little girl, and she's in her 50s at this point, she said, ever since I was a little girl, my father refers to me as Big Ears. Whole life. She said, I saw him in the retirement village last week. I walked into the room and he said, oh, look, Big Ears is here. And I told her, I said, that's trauma. The person who's supposed to love and protect you, right, through your life, has this thing they need to say to you that sends you into hiding. That is how I distinguish trauma from something else. Do you have a reason to hide any part of yourself? Because we live our full lives when we bring everything to the table. Light, shadow, things that other people call defects, things that other people appreciate, all of it. The things that we're chased into hiding because of that, in some cases, sexual assault. So many clients that come to see me are talking about, they want to have more healthier relationships, and there's this thing in the way, and they may not even be able to identify it at first. But through the course of conversations, because I have, as you can imagine, lots of deep conversations with my clients, sometimes not as often or as much as I would like before the session, because sometimes they come into this not knowing me from Adam, really, except for having seen me speak that day, right? These are the messages that I want to get out. So, trauma. There's one part of the push-pull dynamic around being seen. Knowing that you have so much to bring to the table, but knowing that at some point in the past, maybe bringing that thing to the table put you in danger, caused harm, caused serious physical harm sometimes. Or perhaps it was something that was lost, felt like it was lost to disease, or this is not reductive of me to say this, mean girls on the playground, mean boys on the playground. That stuff's real. You know me, Mr. Sensitive Don. Do you ever think I had problems on a playground? Of course I did. But this is where it all comes to a head, because this work is really a process of remembering. It's remembering what we've shoved down inside due to this trauma, or remembering what, especially in the case of women, they've forgotten because they're so busy taking care of every other thing around them every day that it's like, oh, I forgot I used to be so adventurous because I've been taking care of all these people for all this time. When I work with someone who's a recent empty nester, they're usually like, I just want to figure out who I am again. Like, I'm starting from scratch. I forgot. These photos are for me. I love it when my clients tell me that the photos are just for them. Now, there's also another story I want to tell you. I promise it's not too long. Early on when I started doing this work, I found myself in Ireland. It was the first time I got to leave the country for work, right? And I was in Ireland. My ancestry, in spite of my last name, I'm Irish. The place my mother always wanted me to get to, and she's obviously such a big part of my work, like from the grave. If you don't know, she passed before I started doing this, but she's an inspiration to this work. And so I found myself in Ireland. I do the speech. I'm doing the work with all these gorgeous, awesome women, brave women. And there was one woman who was watching my slideshow that I had playing outside of the room on this little TV. And every time I walked over to the TV, I'd be like, to say, oh, hello, during the break, she would see me and and she'd run away. She'd run down the hallway. So then that afternoon, I see her standing at the TV again, and I think, oh, I want to go say hi. So I start to walk over, and she sees me, whoop, runs away. Well, of course, on the day before last day, she hired me. She stayed at the TV, and she hired me. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for hiring me. I can't wait to work with you. So step into the room to work with her, and I'm setting up the lights, and I can see she's very nervous. It's one of my tricks. Don't tell anybody. When I'm setting up the lights, I'm letting my clients get used to being in the space. I usually know what the lights are about to do. But anyway, and I said, well, I'm just going to take a couple of test photos before we start, which is also a lie. Just kidding. Sometimes I have to do test photos. I shouldn't have told you that. And as I started photographing her, she started crying. Now, this is something that happens all the time. This happens, especially at retreats and conferences, nearly every single time. But this was like not just kind of sobbing. This was like meltdown all the way, tears, like cannot come back from this, tears. And so I said, you know what? I put my camera down. Part of my stories always has to do with putting the camera down, because this is not really about photography. I sat down next to her and I said, we don't have to do this today, knowing that we really couldn't do it that day too. And I said, if you want to share whatever you're feeling right now, I'm here. Like, I'll listen. And she said, after she cried for a little longer, she said, I hired a guy to do a photo session for me about 5 years ago. And halfway through the photo session, he stopped in the middle of the session and he said, I cannot do this because you are so unphotogenic. Unphotogenic. She spent the following 5 years recoiling in terror whenever even a cell phone camera came out, right? So if someone wanted to do, this is what she told me, if someone wanted to take pictures of her and the friends at dinner, she would make any excuse that needed to happen to get up and leave the table. I know that pain, not from that specific thing, but that was how I used to respond to public speaking. I would get up and leave if it was my turn to talk. For her, this was a huge, unbelievably real fear, because some other photographer failed at his job. I cannot stress that enough. I cannot stress that enough. I also want to pass along, I actually meant to grab a copy of my book before I started this, in case I told this story. That woman in one of my test photographs is the cover of my book. It is the only photograph on the cover of my book being seen. Witnessing the Divine Feminine Through the Lens of Love. That's the full name of the book. She gave me permission to tell the story. The story's in the book. She's on the cover of the book. Unphotogenic is a failure of the person taking the photograph. Now, I don't expect every photographer to know what I know. I would love it if they did. I've thought about, showing people more about this work, showing other photographers more about this work. But in the end, they missed something because they were trying to create the thing they wanted to create. Right? So I certainly have a vision when I'm working with people, but my vision is that their essence is going to show up that day. And that when they see it, they're going to recognize it, they're going to fall in love with it, and in the process, fall in love with themselves. Right? So when I'm working with someone, let's put it this way. When my clients share their photos on Facebook, you know what all their friends say? That is so you. That's everything that I love about you. Because like I told you with the story with the client from DC that gave me the 3 things that she hated about herself, her friends, of course, do not see her that way. When her friends see her, they see the beautiful, powerful, smart, capable, whatever her words are. I never give people words. Whatever her words were, that's who they see. That's who they see. Because she's not wearing the armor when they see her. She's probably not judging herself too much when they're having coffee. right? Okay, so the other one I wanted to kind of touch on is this idea of it's imposter syndrome. It's kind of wounded entrepreneur. By the way, all these things are the same thing, really. But even when someone comes to me and they're like, I love having my photograph taken, I'm using these for my website, I'm doing a rebranding, these are the outfits that I want to wear, that's all awesome. But there's always some moment in the session where they open up to me because their armor's coming off, because I know there's somewhere else to dig to. And they say, now, if it's for business, we've honestly already had some conversations before the session. So we've done some of this work prior. But everybody has a blind spot. Mine was public speaking. Mine was doing this thing I'm doing right now. I wouldn't have done this 10 years ago if you put a gun to my head. No way. I wouldn't have had the knowledge at the time either, but I would not have done it. That blind spot is usually where our gift is. And it's usually our shadow at the same time, or at least has some tertiary relationship to our shadow. I've worked with the most powerful women walking the face of the earth. I know this to be true. And many of them, that is the thing that they want to touch within themselves that they don't think exists. I'm resisting the urge to tell you another story, but I will put another little flavor to this, is that oftentimes when these women see the photograph of themselves that shows them truly in their power for the first time, the initial reaction is to recoil from it initially. Because what they see is what... There's no polite way to put this, but I'll just tell you the way a client said it to me once. When I showed her, I saw this photograph, I was like, oh my God, so powerful, everything's come together, and I can see her just owning it. And I showed it to her, and she said, I look like such a bitch, and turned her face away from the camera. Now, that's actually happened more than once when I've shown clients these photographs where they're very powerful. And what I asked her is what I would ask any woman who has that reaction, which is, oh, who told you you're a bitch when you're powerful? Because that came from somewhere. And it didn't come from... That's not a self-judgment. That came from somewhere else. And I'll tell you that in all of those instances, when there was that initial recoiling from the image, those clients always choose those photos. And those photos always end up on, their homepage or on their social media or their about page, etc., etc. So again, the way to get there is from the armor. Now, part of the armor, describing yourself as a bitch is a piece of armor that someone else put on you. It's like someone took this big heavy thing, this big heavy helmet or mask, and put it over you and said, don't show that anymore, and put this thing over your face. And told you what it looks like when you don't have that mask on. Same thing can happen with a smile. I will often ask my clients sometime early in the session, 30 seconds, for the next 30 seconds, don't smile. And just to see where it goes. Usually leads to tears, because tears of joy, tears of liberation really. Because what's been reflected to me is that it was the first time they felt like they didn't have to smile. They didn't have to have the smile plastered on their faces that said, everything's okay. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. It's very liberating not to have that mask on. So I think since I've been talking for 45 minutes, I didn't plan on going this long. I'm going to jump ahead to some of my tips for you. These are actually some of the processes that I use with my clients. These are keys, not really tips. Specifically, I don't have I use these 5 steps with people, but there are 3 touchstones that everyone can use going into a photo session with actually anyone. The first thing is grounding. So this sounds simple, but when you've got a camera pointed at you, it is not. So I invite you to, no matter who you're working with, whether it's someone that would know how to help you ground, as I do, or someone who is completely unaware of the concept of, grounding or meditation or anything, to say, you know what, I just need a moment, I'm not sure how long, to close my eyes and take a couple of deep breaths and feel my feet on the ground. If they'll let you, which they should, kick your shoes off. That helps. All my clients take their shoes off. And just take that moment to do what I'm going to do right now. I can tap into it sort of quickly. I'm here. Having someone that can guide you through that is helpful, but not necessary. What that's getting you towards really is surrendering. Because what you don't want to do is control every minute detail of the session. Unless you've hired someone who's completely incompetent. In which case, you might want to try to, say, I think the light's supposed to be, pointing towards me, not towards the wall. Actually, that was a terrible example because I do that sometimes if I want to bounce the light off the wall. Pretend I did not give that example. So, you don't want to control those things because sometimes we have reasons, but you want to surrender. And part of surrendering is actually knowing that you can control some things, and it's these 3 keys. So, grounding, you can control that. If they're trying to rush you, don't let them. Take the time to drop in. They will appreciate it because their photographs will look better because of what you did. Secondly, do a little work before the session to try to decipher what some of these facets might be for you. Every woman is an incredible array of both tangible and intangible facets. As I've mentioned, they are creative, sensual, spiritual, adventurous, nurturing, soft, powerful, intelligent, an infinite number of facets that magically arrange themselves into that woman's unique feminine essence. And it's different for every woman. And not only is it different for every woman, but it's different for every woman from moment to moment as they flow through life and through different situations. Because different moments call for different things. But it's like a recipe for each person. It's a little of this and a little of this and a whole bunch of this, in the moment, right? Try to sort out what some of those things are for you, have been for you in the past. My touchstone, the holy grail of all of this work is to, I'm speaking somewhat metaphorically, but try to imagine who you were when you came in. Who was the little girl or little boy? What made up who they were before they walked into that first social situation? Who was the pre-social you? The adventurous you? The loud you? The quiet you? The shy you that people tried to force to be an extrovert, right? Or the quiet one that people tried to force to be loud? Or the loud one that people tried to force to be quiet? Me, I was a very loud introvert. Very loud, sensitive boy. Because I couldn't help but make jokes about everything. But anyway, that's probably a form of armor as well. So anyway, trying to touch that magic space of what some of those facets might be for you. Now I have something that may help you get there actually, because there's a workbook that I use with my clients. It's a playbook. I recently changed the name because my clients say it's fun. The Diamond Facets Playbook. You can access this playbook by going to tribeofdiamonds.com/shine, SHINE. You can sign up to get free access to this playbook, and it helps you kind of sort out what some of those things might be, right? And actually, when you're done filling out the workbook, it gives you an opportunity to schedule a call, and you can just chat with me about what you found, if you so desire. I hope we get to have that conversation. The third thing is to have a message. A message to whoever is viewing this photograph. Because you've landed, you've grounded yourself, you're in touch with your power or your sensuality or your adventurous nature or your humor or whatever that thing is. You're just letting it work back up from your feet through your body, not into your head. And thinking is the enemy of this work. And letting yourself just feel it. When you look at the camera at this point, you've made a connection with whoever's looking at that photograph later. This is like a time machine, right? Because you're looking at the camera, but what's looking back is not the camera, it's the person looking at your website right now. Now that you've made this connection, have a message for that person. Whether it's for your website, social media, dating profile, or just for yourself. Just for yourself. What would that message be? Hold that message in your mind as you look at the camera so that the person looking at the photograph, I'm not kidding you, from